You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 85, we'll be discussing the latest in Overwatch League news, share our thoughts on Stage 3, Week 3 in our post-game discussion, and look ahead at what to expect in Stage 3, Week number 4. But before we can get into the news and introduce you to my co-host, I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who is hanging out with us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course to thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, is my co-host Spider, and Spider, it's been a very interesting week, both in the Overwatch League and in real life. I know you've had a lot of stuff going on. I've had a lot of family stuff going on the past couple of days, so there's a lot happening in such a short amount of time. We're basically coming off of one of the wackiest days of Overwatch League that we have seen up until this point. But looking back, I know you've had a lot of stuff going on, so how did the weekend treat you? Because from your Twitter, it didn't seem like it was all that great at times.
No, it started out really good. My daughter's 6th birthday was Friday. We went to the beach. We had a great day. It was a lot of fun. Saturday we come home because it was just a day trip. Come home, eat lunch, and then I get food poisoning. Not great. Hashtag I am not loving it. Pretty sure I know the cause of it, and probably DeFran's fault. Mm-hmm. But and then Sunday it was just recovery. Like, we had some stuff to do. Luckily, the food poisoning came and went very quickly and very painfully. So if my voice gives out tonight, I apologize. Like, my throat is still...
Hashtag throwing up for DeFran.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then Sunday, luckily, we had a crazy day of Overwatch to, like, tide me over and help me recuperate. So it was a weekend, man. I hear you had your own adventure over the weekend. Like, you're still catching up. So how about you, man? How was your weekend?
It's been pretty good. Obviously, we're entering summer, and we're so short-handed at work. Like, we have some new hires who, one called in all week, who is supposed to be working with me, and the other is not working out. So we're back to square one, basically. But I basically spent the weekend hanging out with the family a lot. We're doing a lot of cookouts because the weather's been really nice in Chicago. I've been playing a ton of Wizards Unite, of course, because that just came out. So that's basically, like, that was most of my day yesterday, just hanging out with the family, playing the new Harry Potter game. I got up to level 11 earlier today. Nice. But unfortunately, like, I ended up missing, like, one of the craziest days of Overwatch League, which I'm anxious to go back and see, especially given 3 of the surprise results from that day. One of them was expected because, your boys of, Dallas Fuel ended up losing yesterday. But I can't really complain. It's just been pretty hectic, and it is the summer now, so my schedule is going to get pretty stacked here very, very soon. But that's enough about that. Let's go ahead and jump into the news from this week. So we actually have quite a bit of roster news, both for new players coming in, as well as additional coaches to coaching staffs from the LA teams. And one team in particular has kind of been at the forefront of a rebuild, which we'll get here in just a little bit. But first up, we had a trade between the Toronto Defiant and the Shanghai Dragons. So we know that, we have Shanghai, who have really been doing a lot of the Sombra compositions. They were really kind of at the forefront of that in the Overwatch League, and of course we've seen the resurgence of Sombra more and more as the season has progressed. And the Dragons have looked to bolster their front line by going out and acquiring Envy from the Toronto Defiant. Now, this move does bring the Dragons up to 9 players on their lineup, and Envy will join alongside Gagiri as the team's second off-tank. And this also means that, for the Defiance, they're basically working with the minimum. They have 8 players on their roster. Obviously, they had their recent promotion of their contenders, Tank Line, Shuriken and Gods, who have been starting full-time now, so we're not expecting anything crazy from their camp quite yet. But this does mark the 3rd team that Envy has been on, as he did play for the Valiant before joining the Defiant. Now, this is kind of coming at a time when both of these teams have kind of been on opposite ends. You have the Defiant, who have definitely been having their fair share of struggles. Dragons have been doing fairly good in their past 10 games and are definitely in the playoff discussion. But Toronto has kind of been free-falling and seem to be lacking a few key components here as of late. But I have to say, I was really curious to see Envy starting basically right away for the Shanghai Dragons, since they have been running a lot of Devo-less compositions. So I want to get your thoughts on this overall trade and what you think kind of signaled this move for them, even though they've kind of been the ones at the forefront of that Sombra play.
I mean, I think it's a good pickup for them. I guess something behind the scenes, they just didn't have confidence in Gaguri to play Diva. And I think it is important to kind of have a Diva player on your roster. And we haven't seen too much of Envy on the Dragons. I mean, he did play basically one whole map, and they lost it because they tried to play Goats. So I think he's going to need some time to fit in. I think the Chinese cheese, even though it's a Korean roster, will live on through the Dragons. I think they're kind of happy where they are. This to me kind of just smells of future proofing the roster. Maybe in case they need a Diva player, or just a backup, or it's hard to say. I think this more so was a result of just the Defiant probably wanting to offload him while they could still get some money for him. Just because if you look at the Defiant, they are having trouble. They are struggling with their current tank duo, but you want to build around a tank duo that speaks the same language, that can build synergy and stuff like that. And I guess Envy just wasn't the answer for that. So I think this is a good pickup for the Dragons. It kind of stinks for Defiant to lose, what was at one point one of the best, heralded as one of the best Diva players in the league, but like a lot of the best Season 1 players, he's been kind of muted in Season 2. So I think, Defiant, he wasn't working out, so they were like, all right, well, we might as well get a little bit of money for him. And that's how the trade probably went down.
Yeah, and I know, too, this past week, there's been a lot of talks about how trades have fared for teams, especially with the recent performances of Boston and Dallas, because a lot of the analysts were kind of reevaluating a trade between, having RCK and Note swapping teams. So we'll see how this one is going to work out. But it basically gives Dragons another look, as opposed to just being primarily, running, 3 DPS composition looks with that Sombra play. But, really early on, it's really hard to gauge where they are, just because they haven't really had time to build that synergy as of yet. So give it a couple more weeks, and I'm sure this lineup is going to look like a completely different team once they have some more practice time in with one another. Now, the Dragons were not the only team who were buyers here in the past week, as we also had to take a look at the Florida Mayhem, who are well, they have to be at the end of this rebuild at this point, because they're at the max roster. So, Mayhem, they are back to continuing that full Korean approach, of course, but we have 3 new sign-ins, both on their roster, as well as 3 new sign-ins for their coaching staff. So taking a look at their new player sign-ins, all of these come from WGS Armament. So they picked up their off-tank Gargoyle, their flex DPS, DPI, as well as their main tank Karayan. Now, WGS has kind of been one of the smaller orgs in Contenders Korea. I know, back when we were covering, a lot of Contenders Korea during kind of the off-season of the Overwatch League, this was one of the teams, at least the tank duos, that you and I were pretty high on, so I'm really happy to see Karayan getting moved up, but it does kind of make you wonder, they're taking a lot of pieces from WGS, and of course, the Mayhem recently made the trade to the Valiant in order to secure their main tank, who at the time was Fate. Now, Fate's coming on this team. Mayhem have still struggled pretty heavily. Now, they did get a key win against a team that has been on a bit of a resurgence here as of late, both in stand-ins and our power rankings. Do you feel like Fate has anything to worry about, knowing that there's already like this pre-built synergy that's just waiting in the wings at this point?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think Karian and Gargoyle make a great tank duo, and they're gonna be able to slot right in, and with the current roster, and just get running. And while Fate looked decent last week, in his debut, he really didn't do a whole lot. Zephyr still remains a problem, regardless of Bastion shenanigans and stuff like that. Like, he still has all the normal Zephyr problems. So I think Fate should be worried. But you're also looking at the possibility that they could run Fate and Gargoyle and Karian and Gargoyle depending on the map. Like, their hero pools are pretty interchangeable. Like, they could almost go like the Soul route, which is up in the air right now, depending on how you take Fisher's comments. But you could run the different types of comps for whatever the map is, and that it seems to be working well for Soul. So maybe Mayhem's just going to throw as many things at the board as they can and see what sticks. And I think if you're in the rebuilding phase, which you are as the Mayhem at this point, I think that's a good approach. I am a little sad that they basically turned around and made this announcement the day after that I said they probably wouldn't do this. So that was like, oh, good, F me, right? But as a whole, like, these are really good pickups. This is a pretty tank stacked roster. Just looking at tanks, like, they have 5 tanks total out of the 12 players. But I guess when you have like BQB and Saya players or DPS, you're not really going to be searching around for a lot of DPS. You're going to get like a bench DPS, which is basically what they picked up. And then you're going to look to fix your major problems, which right now was Zephyr. I mean, Hagapon's still doing good. Like, the support line, it just needs to kind of get in sync, and they could be good. And I think Florida could be like a 15th, 14th team, and then start working their way up, kind of like how the Dragons did. So I think as a whole, like, these pickups make sense. They're pretty much what was teased the whole time, like kind of what leaked the whole time. So it wasn't surprising when they made the announcement, and they bolstered their coaching staff, which is something I don't think we've ever been able to say for the Mayhem. Like, they've picked up like a coach or two at a time, but like they are basically diving in the deep end with coaches. So it is good to see that the Mayhem are starting to take this a little seriously. Even though they did like the 180 from the we're not going to do a Korean roster, but they're finally starting to invest some money in it, and that's going to produce results. It may not be championship level results, but it will not be the worst Overwatch League team in history. Results are at least not quite that bad. So I think this is a good move all around for them.
Well, I still feel like for this season, we're still going to probably say that, this is the least winning team in Overwatch League history. We'll see how they fare next season, because this is definitely a move that they're making for their whole rebuild and in their Season 3 look. And they'll cut the fat if they need to, because, working 12 people into a roster is definitely a tall task in itself. But this is a team who has basically played with a minimum. So they basically, they've been on the shallow end, and now they're just throwing themselves in the deep end, trying to figure out how all of these pieces are going to work. But they did pick up, 3 people for their coaching staff as well. So they picked up Unread as their new head coach. He will be coaching alongside KH1, who will be acting as one of the assistant coaches, as well as a new analyst. So the 2 coaches that they picked up both come from WGS Armament. So again, a rebuild around that particular team. While Ryu will be joining from Mayhem Academy, who, at one point were their affiliate team until they decided to just kind of like take off the rest of the year, and now, of course, we see that roster serving under the Revival banner. So, all in all, like, I'm really anxious to see how this works. I know our good buddies over at casual OWL fans are going to have a lot to say about this. If you guys want a perspective from the Mayhem fans, definitely go check them out. And I know they're probably celebrating that win that they got this past week and living that up to the fullest, as they honestly should, since, you know, those have kind of been few and far between. But I'm excited. You know, I don't dread watching the Mayhem compete like I used to. Like, I'm really curious to see how they're going to implement these players, how quickly they're going to implement it, because I would not be surprised if we see Karayan and Gargoyle just come in and play immediately going into their next game. So definitely a team to have a little bit more hope in moving forward, but it is going to be a bit of a slow process just due to the amount of moving pieces. I'm just looking over at Twitch chat from Trent, who says, "Fun fact: Florida man stories increased by 37% after Mayhem wins." I would believe that. A lot of crazy things do happen in Florida, some of which also pertains to the Mayhem getting a win in the Overwatch League. That totally makes sense.
Yep. I will say that if we ever do get the 2-2-2 lock, Florida is a very scary looking team. Like the amount of talent that they have on their team now is insane. Like their ceiling is very high. So they may struggle in the GOATS meta, but if we ever shift back to like a DPS focused meta, like we saw last, basically, but them versus Houston, they basically played old school DPS type comps for most of it. They're very scary. So if you are one of the many multiplying Florida Mayhem fans that it seems are popping up, you should be happy.
Yeah, maybe we'll see more come out of the woodwork with this. It could happen. Or maybe they'll just get out of the clown car. I don't know how it works in Florida. It's one of the two, I would imagine. But anyways, speaking of coaches, we also have both LA teams making some moves as well. And both Los Angeles teams have turned to Contenders talent to help bolster their coaching staffs. So for the Los Angeles Gladiators, they have hired Faustus as their new assistant coach. Meanwhile, you have the Valiant, who have signed Reprise as their assistant coach. So a little bit of background on these two. They both have long tenures in the Contenders scene. You have Faustus, who had served as an assistant coach on, you know, one of Europe's powerhouse teams who got crushed by NA. I'm always going to throw that interface. That, of course, being Angry Titans, who lost in their own house during the showdown. But, you know, they did win the most recent season of Contenders Europe. And Reprise is the owner and head coach of Revival, aka X-Mayhem Academy, who, you know, formed after their departure from the Contender scene. And I know Reprise noted that he will still own Revival and continue to support the team in Contenders, but I'm assuming that's going to mean, like, he's still going to have a limited role, but he's still going to be there kind of behind the scenes, helping them along in their journey in Contenders this season, which is, of course, going on right now. So Reprise will also be joining his former Mayhem Academy head coach, Promise, on the Valiant, who is actually on that team as another one of their assistant coaches as well.
I mean, it's always good to see coaches from the, you know, what we would consider the top tier Contenders teams, regardless of who beat who, when NA stomped EU and stuff like that. So I think teams are looking for good coaches, and both of these fine gentlemen have proven themselves. Faustus really strikes me as a tank coach. There's no basis for that.
Because he's from Europe?
Yeah, exactly. That's the basis for it. I'm glad you picked up on that. And that's, well, to me, that's the one area like the Gladiators have kind of struggled, is their front line has been really iffy. Like their you know, DPS, regardless of if it's Decay or Surefour, have looked fairly consistent, and you know their support line looks good. So I feel like they brought in another coach for the tank line. Like, just looking at the Gladiators, that's what it strikes me. But he could just be a general analytic, like, assistant coach. Reprise, I think is just a coach to, you know, bolster the Valiant. Like obviously they got rid of coaches, so they need to replace them. But I'm curious to see what this means for the big picture for LA Valiant. Like, does this mean that Packington is gonna permanently get that head coach spot? Because I feel like after you beat an undefeated team, like, you know, you have to kind of, you know, you have to kind of you should kind of be able to like say, well, maybe you should just give me the full job. And the fun fact about Packing 10 is he's coaching from the East Coast. Like he's not even in LA right now. So that's pretty impressive. So as glad I am that these two guys got picked up. I'm curious what it means for the bigger picture for both teams, but specifically the Valiant. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on basically the news for the next week, because I'm sure we'll get an announcement one way or another, probably before the end of the stage.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And, speaking of recent announcements as well, we also have gotten our first look at a new Overwatch skin that's going to be released. That is, of course, Overwatch League themed after our Season 1 MVP, Jonak. Now, I have to say, like, this was pretty interesting. We still don't know, like, how much this is going to cost, but it is going to cost Overwatch League tokens. So, if it's the same price point as the other Overwatch League skins, it'll probably be 100 Overwatch League tokens. But then again, we also just had, like, double drops this past week, so they might just double it just to, even it out anyway. I don't know, it doesn't really matter how much it costs. 100, 200, we'll probably have the tokens just based off of this past week. But the MVP skin for Jonak is based off of his favorite animal, that being the octopus. So, if you've seen Jonak, you probably know that he has an octopus tattoo on his arm. And basically with the skin, it replaces Zenyatta's head with like a fishbowl, and you can see an octopus on it. And of course, the orbs are also little octopus as well, or octopi, I guess, is the best way to put it. Yeah. So we do know that we will be able to purchase this, and it will be coming out on June 27th. So I know either way, no matter how much this costs, I'm probably going to buy it, as long as it's not like some ridiculous amount. Like we've seen, I can't remember like how much the emote was when that came out. It was like 200, 250, something like that.
It was 300 initially, and then they knocked it down to 2.
Okay. So who knows, maybe they'll do something crazy like that, but I honestly don't expect that for the price point, for, just a skin, when you could basically get 2 skins for 100, as is right now.
Yeah, I would fully expect that it would be 200, like that's kind of the going rate, that's the rate for the All-Star skins, and this is on basically the same level as the All-Star skins, like the effects and everything are very, very good. Like, if you have not seen this skin, go look it up, because this may be the best skin that they've put out in a long time. The fact that the orbs have like the octopi on them were amazing, and just the color palette and everything, like this, it's honestly my favorite skin. And like this skin alone has convinced me that my next golden gun will be Zenyatta. Like go watch the video. Like the video was really good. Like the interview that went along, it was really good. Like my favorite part of the interview was where he asks if Prophet is gonna get a skin, because Prophet was the final MVP, and they were like no, and Jonak would just like, they said like he lit up like, haha, I got the skin as you get, type of thing. So but now we're like, oh, is like every MVP gonna get a skin? Because that might come into play for my MVP voting, because I will definitely vote for who I think would make the best skin. So, and we got a good discussion on our Discord about it. So if you want to see my picks, it's in the discussion channel for the Overwatch League. But this is amazing. Like I didn't see this coming.
All I want to know is, when are we going to get like a cartoon series for Doomfish and Octopi?
Oh god,
it's gotta happen.
The Netflix series I never knew I needed.
If only. Well, speaking of things that, you do need, we do have the Overwatch League trading cards that were actually just released by Upper Deck, and I will already note, I have already spent a small fortune on these. So Upper Deck released the 2017 through 2018 Overwatch League inaugural season trading cards. This was the other day. So the base set does have like 125 player cards, and then there's definitely a lot more like cards featuring like maps, season 1 highlights, team checklists, and of course, you do have the rarer cards in the set. So you have ink cards, which are basically autograph cards, which come anywhere from like 1 to 3 autographs, as well as fragments, which are jersey memorabilia cards, which also go they either have 1, 2, or 3. Obviously, the triple inks and fragments being the more rare out of the lot. And some of the cards are even serial numbered as well. So that usually ranges anywhere from like, I want to say it was like 50 to the rarest ones being only 10 being made. Now, looking at this, if you're wondering how much these packs cost, the packs go for $3.99. You can get a box, which is 24 packs, which is $93.99. And if you have a lot of effort money and you want a case, you can buy 12 boxes for $11.99. So I did an unboxing, the day of the release. So those 24 packs got a pretty decent pull. I will say, like, as someone that is new to Upper Deck, I didn't like that the cards weren't automatically rotated when you open them, because some of them are not in portrait, some of them are landscape, so that was kind of a pain in the butt. But when you are opening packs, basically, like, it'll show the card, and then it will have like a box kind of like on the right hand side of the screen where it will display everything you've opened. So you do have an option to like zoom in on the card, and then you can't rotate it if it's one of them that's not in the right view mode. So keep an eye on that. And I'll say this, like, there is a lot of confusion about these cards because they are e-packs. So a lot of people have been wondering, well, like, can you physically buy cards? Now, you can't buy card packs, like, in person. Basically, it's like a mixture of digital and physical cards. So basically, if it's a physical card, there's like an indicator. There'll be like an orange or gray icon on the back of the card, which will denote whether it is a physical card. Now, if there is not an icon, that means that the card is digital only. So, like, for the player cards for the base set, all of those are digital. But if you have duplicates, if you can buy 9 of them, you can get a physical copy of that card. And there's a lot of, like, confusing things about the way that this is run. But basically, like, they have infrasight cards, which are, like, kind of, like, see-through. All of those are physical. But if you're looking for, like, a certain player, it's best to just utilize the on-site trade-in, which I use a lot to get all of the Soul Dynasty cards, which I basically got all of the rare base set cards, and I got all of the infrasight cards, so I'm going to have all those shipped out to me. But you do have to pay to get the cards shipped to you, which sucks. So you're basically, like, double dipping. So, like, you're paying, like, a flat rate fee. I think it's, like, starts at $3.99. And you can have the option to get top loaders for your cards as well, so they can be protected in, like, sleeves. And that costs, like, 25 cents per card. So with that in mind, if you guys are buying these, I highly recommend you wait till you have a good amount of physical items to redeem before you ship them out. That way you're saving yourself a little bit of money as opposed to just doing it every couple of cards. So the best thing to do, like, if you have some of the rarer cards that you want sent to you, obviously prioritize that initially, and then you can just kind of send them out to you as you go. But I have to say, like, all in all, like, I've been enjoying the system. I have gotten more used to the site, and if you've been on the competitive Overwatch Reddit and you look for, just search for the cards, you will see, like, a couple of the pictures, and the infrasight cards look pretty badass. So as soon as I have them in my possession, I'll definitely give you guys a closer look. But it is a lot of money to invest.
Welcome to collectible cards.
Mm-hmm.
I took a look at it. Like I said when they announced them, not really my thing. They do look cool. If they were physical, like, I'd probably be interested in picking up a couple of packs, but I'm not really interested in the whole e-card collecting thing.
Right.
Like I said, just not my thing. It seems like, based on our YouTube comments, some people are really into it. So I mean, if that's your thing, cool. Like, I am curious to know more about it. So definitely, hop in the Discord and talk to us about it, because I know you're like looking for trades and all kinds of stuff, and you're pretty into it. So I wish I had more that I could say about it. I mean, the cards look cool. I have seen a lot of the cards, but not really my thing, man.
Yeah, like, my biggest thing is I want to see when it comes to the jersey fragment cards, like how different those cards are and like how thick they are, since they do have the fragments in them. I would imagine like there's gonna be a lot more weight to those cards. So I just want to see how the rare stuff is built as opposed to just like a base card for the physical ones. But if you guys are interested in trading, or if you're looking for certain players just from like the base set, feel free to start a trade with me, and you can just send me whatever. I've primarily been collecting Dynasty, obviously, and I actually got the Golden Dynasty avatar earlier for having pretty much like, I think it was like the rare cards for each of the base set for those players. So I got that out of the way. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm trying to sell a couple cards as well on COMC, who also does all of the shipping for Upper Deck as well. So definitely something to keep an eye on. But the market obviously is pretty new, so sell at your own risk, because who knows like how many people are going to be looking to buy in the physical cards right now. It might take a little bit of time. But with that being said, of course, we're here to talk about the Overwatch League. We had a crazy week, a lot of shenanigans going down here in the past couple of days. We had a very interesting Dynasty Spark series, which I know I'm looking forward to talking about. And I figured I'd wear whichever team won. I'd wear that jersey. Even though, Dynasty did kind of let me down. But you know what? It was entertaining.
It was.
Both good and bad. But we'll get there in just a minute. First up, let's talk about how at this point we have two teams that have gone 0-7 going on to beat the top two teams. So you have the LA Valiant, who went 0-7 in Stage 1 of this year, having upset the Vancouver Titans 3-1 here yesterday. And unfortunately, Spider, as I mentioned, like I've not caught yesterday's games, but it's basically like the second time we have seen this season, because we also had the Outlaws, who were coming out of an 0-7 stage, having upset the Shock here just a couple of weeks ago as well. So, we're always kind of talking about, like, the level of parity in the league, and I know there was a lot of discussion on, like, the High Noon Podcast Discord about, like, well, like, the playoff structure, and, like, well, what do the Titans have to play for? And obviously the perfect season would have been one of those seeds, and now that's kind of out the window, so F's in the chat for that, unfortunately. But you know what? This is what the Titans need. So now they've lost on stage with money on the line. Their streak has been broken, and I know, everyone's going to be posting, Runaway's not Overwatch League ready like they always do, pretty much every time that they're on stage. But this is really good. Like, this is a huge win for the Valiant, who have definitely turned things around. And, it does kind of put him in a better position, but they do have a rough stage ahead. But we'll talk about, like, their upcoming matches here in just a bit, because they are 4-1, so they've kind of, like, reached that cutoff point where Stage 3 playoff possibilities is a thing. But I want to get your thoughts on that Valiant versus Titans match, and basically how you think that kind of unfolded. What did the Valiant do to kind of usurp the Titans?
Honestly, it wasn't anything different than Houston did. They just exposed, the chink in the Titans armor, I guess is the best way to say it. Like the Titans, and we kind of talked about it before a little bit, but the Titans haven't looked that good when they're forced to run Sombra. Like I guess I should rephrase that. They haven't looked like the Titans when they're forced to run Sombra. They still look good, but when you move Siemens off the Zarya and you put Janu on there, it's just not the same. Like, if Janu doesn't have the right shield timings, like you can tell he's just not comfortable in Zarya. Like, he's still a decent Zarya, but he can't keep Bumper alive quite to the level that Siemens was able to. Like, he's very quick to throw out his bubble, and then Bumper, pushes a little further forward, and then he gets caught out, and then that left it open. As Trench was saying in the chat, that left it open for the Valiant to basically pounce on him, and a lot of that had to do with Kareev. Like, Kareev lit him up, and that's basically the Valiant's game plan. Is they let him push forward, overextend, hack him, or hack somebody in the back line so they couldn't support him, and then just take him out. And that's basically what they did, rinse and repeat. And I will say that Simonsu is a good Sombra, but he just didn't have like the follow up to it. Like he was actually lapping Shax on EMPs multiple times during the map. They just didn't have the same follow up, and it just seemed like Vancouver didn't know how to answer the Sombra play, and we're seeing that we saw it with the Shock too. Like they just didn't know how to handle that. Like they're so used, like, and if you look at Vancouver and you look at San Francisco, they're both very aggressive teams. Like Vancouver, obviously a lot more so than Shock. Like Shock is very like tempered in their aggression. Like they have set plays, and then when that set goes off, they get very aggressive. Whereas Vancouver is definitely very push W, run into them, and let's just mow them down. Unfortunately, when there's a Sombra in the mix, and when you've lost your diva and you're running a Sombra, you have to be a little more tempered and wait for that. So that's why when Shock lost to Houston, it was a little bit closer of a match because Shock could still kind of stick to their game plan. They were just getting caught out, at certain key points in that game plan. Whereas Vancouver, like they just didn't have an answer for it. Like, and you could see like basically the Eichenwald hold from I think it was Eichenwald. There was a hold that basically broke Vancouver, and Vancouver had a little bit of a struggle after that, and they never quite recovered from that. So I think we'll see Vancouver learn from this. Like this is, like you said, this is what they needed. Like they needed a kick in the pants to say like, all right, we need to learn how to adjust. Like we can't just run 3-3 anymore. I'm a little worried that they won't be able to adjust fast enough, just because if you're putting Simonsu on Sombra, that means Janu is the worst Sombra. So you got to kind of look at the team dynamics at that point and say, okay, well, there's a little bit of an issue there. And it's the funny thing is it's actually similar to the issue Dallas is having. It's like they don't have a good Sombra. The only difference is Vancouver has a lot more talent on their team, so they look much better regardless. And Kareev playing Ana, like that's the right call to make in that situation. Like when you have I guess when the other team lacks a diva, you should absolutely run the Ana, because the Ana can keep people alive. It can sleep people who are out of position. Like Haxall got slept a lot. It all in all, it was just Vancouver didn't know how to adjust to the Valiant's play fast enough, and that's why Valiant won. Like they just took the momentum and they never let Vancouver get back in their groove.
And it's interesting to see like how more common it's become, not just for the top teams to kind of get tested because of the Sombra play, but also how many more teams have been just saying, F it, we're not going to run 3-3, we're to focus on our Sombra play. And we have seen a resurgence of quite a few teams actually, kind of like throughout the league. So that's why this stage has been a lot more interesting than we may have believed towards the start of it. Because I know you and I were both kind of like, oh, well, this is probably going to be a rematch. And we just kind of like rolled our eyes, but I cannot say that I've been disappointed by anything that we have seen so far throughout Stage 3, and, Stage 4 potentially, because it's not official yet, could be even more interesting if we do see the 2-2-2 lock, but we're waiting for official confirmation on that still, other than, just Yiska tweeting about it and posting about it on, I think Upcomer is that esports website. So moving on, speaking of Sunday, and of course, this did happen on Sunday. Sunday was actually like one of the biggest days of upsets that we have seen in Overwatch League history. So we had, LA Valiant defeat Vancouver Titans, which we just talked about. That one went 3-1. We also had Florida Mayhem picking up a much-needed win against the Houston Outlaws 3-1. Now we had Boston Uprising defeat Paris Eternal 3-2, which was another reverse sweep for Boston Uprising. Now, I do have a couple of notes. There's just something about Boston. Everyone assumes that Philly is the team that always goes to a 5th map. No, it's actually Boston. Boston went to their 20th 5-map series since the Overwatch League started. They also had one during the preseason, but we're not going to count that. But what's really crazy about this is Like, basically half of Boston's wins this season have come in the form of reverse sweeps. Like, I don't know what that says about the team, but it's just been a weird season for Boston. And I know a lot of that was just due to, a lot of the backline substitutions here so far this stage for the Uprising. And we did get to see the return of Aim God back in their starting lineup this week. And of course, we've been seeing more and more Hackfist compositions from Boston as well. But I have to say, like, when I looked at the scoreline yesterday on my phone, I was just like, well, so much for my pick'ems this week, and I'm sure that was the case for a lot of other people as well. But it's so crazy to see, like, there's some weeks when we have, like, maybe one upset, and then we had essentially 3 all in the span of just one day.
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy day, but that Boston game was really, really good. And we keep saying it, but when a team plays to their strengths, they just look better. Like, and that's basically what happened is Boston, even though, they came out on, the first couple maps and they did play, DPS based comps, and they made it, fairly close. I think map 1 was 0-2, but beyond that, it was fairly close. Then they went into Eichenwald, and Eichenwald, like, Boston just looked like supercharged. Like, Blase was popping off. Like, he was like the old school Blase, Doomfist. Like, he was tearing it up. And Fusions just took the team and put him on his back, and he threw out like shatters left and right, and he was hitting everybody. It was crazy, and Paris just didn't know how to counter it. Like, Paris tried, mix and matching and running different things, and Paris has looked iffy on DPS. I mean, they look on iffy on every comp, but they have gotten a little bit better on DPS comps, but still looked a little sloppy. And Boston just rode their momentum after that. Like, the fact that Boston came out and took the last map 2-0 very convincingly was actually like the statement Boston needed. So I was really surprised that this happened, because I forget who it was, but somebody in chat was like, I'd be surprised if Boston wins a map the rest of the season, and then they turn around and reverse sweep it. So that that was Sunday in a nutshell. Like, you never know what's gonna happen. And then that was Trenchfoot. But and then we have the Florida Houston game, and Florida comes out, they look good. Houston still looks okay, but then you start to see some problems in Houston. Like, they're running these DPS comps, they're running the what they have been known to run the last couple of weeks and look good, but they were playing really sloppy, and it wasn't what we saw the last couple of weeks. Like, it was almost like they got cocky about running these DPS comps. They were like, oh, we're playing Florida. Florida sucks. Let's just we can roll them and stuff like that. So Jake was caught out of position like a ridiculous amount of times. Like, I could probably go back and like bookmark like every 10 minutes 2 or 3 times, like, where the caster's like, oh, Jake dies first and stuff like that. Like, and it was crazy. And on the other side of that, Linkster got bodied. Like, Linkster was always known as one of the best Widow v Widows, and Saya player just shit on him. Like, there's no other way to say it. Like, Linkster was not even a factor for most of this match. And then Houston had to scramble, and they had to do different things, and they tried to run goats, and that didn't work, and then they tried to run different comps, and they just struggled about it. And that's kind of where the conversation earlier Florida came from. Is Florida looked very good at DPS, and I think Houston just didn't prepare for this match like they should have. So I don't think this is indicative of like Houston's on a bigger backslide, like if they had their moment in the sun and then they're sliding back to like the Papega tier. I think Houston still is on the upswing. Like, I still think they're getting better. I think they just got a little ahead of themselves. Like, they're not quite there yet. And I think this was kind of like a glimpse into the future for Florida. Like, I think if Florida sticks with it, they will, continue the success. And, then we capped it all off with the Valiant beating Vancouver, which we talked about. But, Sunday was almost more excitement than I could handle. Like, obviously, like I said, I'm recovering from being sick, and then all that happened, and I was basically like, "What the hell is going on? Like, what is this? Like, what am I watching?" Like, I had to start day drinking just to keep up.
Wait, like, which bizarre world did I wake up in?
The only thing that kept me grounded on Sunday was Dallas lost to Chengdu, which when we put out our power rankings, you will see Dallas took a pretty. I don't know about the overall rankings, but at least for me personally, even as a Dallas fan, they took a pretty hard fall. So at least that part kept me saying, like, if Dallas would have like 4-0'd Chengdu, I especially with Harry Hook on the roster, because I don't know if you know that, but Harry Hook played over Unko. Yeah, that would have been like Bizarro World, but at least all is right in the Dallas camp, and they're right where they should be. But everybody else, I mean, this is what we want. Like, this is the competition that we want. So I hope we have more days like this. Like, I don't care if my pick'ems are right. I just want good matches. And I'm not just saying that because I'm falling further and further behind you.
Yeah, that does tend to happen. But it is worth noting, like, for Dallas as well, we did see Trill debut on stage after, OG did say, like, hey, I think this is a good idea. Like, it does seem like there's a little bit of burnout there, and Trill did get the nod this past week as well, so it was a different look for Fuel in both of their series. And speaking of different looks, Seoul had a lot of them in their series against the Hangzhou Spark. So if you guys missed this series, it was very one-sided at times for both teams. And then Hangzhou just kind of, like, closed the door on Seoul at the very end. But this was a 5-map series. So basically what happens is Seoul falls early. They're down 0-2, and then they just like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. So they start the series running Munchkin, Zunba, Marvel, Illicit, Toby, and Ryo Jaehan. And, the first map was it was close, but not really. The second map was completely one-sided by the Hangzhou Spark. It was very, like, deflated horizon. So what does Seoul do? They go back to the drawing board, and they just like, you know what, we're just gonna sub in the other squad. So they sub in Fitz, Michelle, Fisher, Fleta, Jexay, and Hiley, who would be their more aggressive of the two lineups that we did see, and they won. Like, okay, they're like, okay, we're back in this series, we have a chance to tie it up in map 4. But even at map 4, they subbed out 4 players. So they subbed out Michelle, Fisher, Jexay, and Hiley. So they subbed in Munchkin, Marvel, Toby, and Ryo Jaehan. So they take that one, and then we go to a map 5. And then they do 3 more substitutions, and it was just like, it was one of those moments where I was just like, there's really no brakes on the solar coaster. Like, I don't know what team is going to show up at any point now, just due to the amount of substitutions that we did see. But I thought it was interesting, because you basically have it where, you had momentum, and while, maybe certain lineups looked a little bit better than others, I feel like adding extra substitutions at that point does more harm than good. But I mean, it's a lot easier to say in hindsight, since we do know what the result was, but I feel like with just the amount of momentum that you would have after picking up 2 consecutive wins, that you keep that same lineup out there, even if, just the substitutions as a whole did throw the Spark off. And there were a couple of times when, we would look over at the player cams and you would just see them, like, arms folded, like, blankly staring. Like, what the hell just happened? And trust me, I was feeling the same way. I was just like, well, that happens. Well, maybe we can get back in this. And then that 5th map was just one-sided. So it was both great and terrible at the same time. But you know what? I'm at least thankful that Seoul has been trying to incorporate everyone. I will say it has been to varying degrees of success, but it does make them a very hard team to try to prepare for, because in a series like this, when they basically had 4 maps of substitutions, you really don't know who you're going to be going up against, and, there are a little bit of variance in regards to just the playstyle of each lineup that they have thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, you can make it's a whole new team jokes, And we get it. Like it was six whole new people. Imagine that. But the Fisher roster did look a little better against the Spark, until they ran 3-3. Like that was the part that confused me. Like it wasn't the roster change. It wasn't the swaps in and out. Like I get it. You got beat pretty handily the first two maps. Try something different. You've already prepped this other squad, so put them out, let them run, and then they get a full hold on Numbani. Like they do very well on Numbani, and then they go to Havana and they do very well on Havana too. Like they stop them. I think right after the second point, and then they go to the last map and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna take the map 3 group, Soul 2.0, I think is what they called it, not Soul 3.0, but Soul 2.0, the Fisher comp, and they just run 3-3. Like that's all they ran. So why wouldn't you incorporate the things that worked into that last map? And that last map, you could argue that Oasis on certain points you have to run 3-3, or it's better to run 3-3, but it's by no means one of the maps that any team basically says like it's required to run 3-3. Like you're hurting yourself if you're running 3-3. Like you can run DPS comps on pretty much any point, outside of maybe University, but even University you could still run like ground and pound type DPS comps with like Junkrat. We've seen various levels. So it's just strange to me that they were like, okay, we did really well in Numbani running a DPS like aggressive comp. We're gonna go 3-3 and that's it. Like they made no changes, and that was strange to me. And that's what lost in the map, because when you look at Seoul, when you look at the Spark are one of the best 3-3 teams in the league now. Like I would put them up there with Shock and Vancouver at this point. Like they have that level of knowledge for 3-3 and that play level. So I think it was a weird call from Seoul that lost them. Like you should have been able to ride the momentum and run a DPS comp and try to take that home. And had they lost running that, you could say like, oh well, at least we tried what worked, and it didn't. Like Spark just beat us on it. Whereas when you play into the Spark's hand, like what they did, you kind of leave with like a bad taste in your mouth. Like you're kind of like, why didn't you run what worked? Like, and I'm not as big of a Soul fan as you, so I was just kind of like, yay, go Spark. But beyond that, it was just kind of frustrating to watch. Like because you would expect teams to stick with what's working. Like it's almost like they haven't paid attention these past 2 weeks, where teams are like running to their strengths and then sticking with it and then winning. So it was just kind of frustrating to watch.
That's just one of those things. Like, you don't know who's going to be playing. You also don't know what comp that team is going to be playing. But who knows?
And then there's the whole Fisher wants to take a break type of thing now. So we'll see how that plays out in the next couple of weeks. I
missed that.
Okay, so Fisher basically went on Twit longer and said that like he's having a lot of burnout. Basically the same thing OG's facing. Okay. Like he's having burnout. He kind of wants to take a break. And he said basically one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to take the rest of stage 3 off, or, and this is really dumb, he's just going to keep playing. Like it was very strange, like the way he worded it. But if you watch the video and people have translated the video, you can go on the competitive Overwatch. He basically, you can tell like he is kind of struggling like the same way OG was. So I think it might be in Soul's benefit to kind of give him a break. You have that roster behind them. You have a successful second team on your, or successful first team, depending on how you look at the rosters. You already have starters, so just give him a break and see where that goes. Like it's something that we'll have to keep an eye on.
Well, I mean, they do have 12 starters.
Exactly.
Well, anyways, so just flipping back to the Valiant here really quick, it is worth noting that because of their win against the Titans, that does put them at 4 wins, and For the stage playoffs, 4-3 has always been the cutoff point. So looking at where the Valiant are right now, they are currently 4-1. Their map differential is +8, which I want to say I think has them in 5th for the stage right now. And their 2 remaining games are pretty interesting because this is not an easy strength of schedule to close out this stage. So they're going up against the Hanzhou Spark, who have been looking really good, one of the more competent 3-3 teams out there. Then you also have London Spitfire, who are arguably probably the most flip-flop team in the Overwatch League, looking great at times and then refusing to run Sombra at other times, so it's really hard to tell, like, which version of London is going to show up. But either way, London is still going to be a test for the Valiant, but Valiant have been throwing out different looks. Obviously, you talked about the potency of Kariv on Ana and the amount of sleep darts that he did hit in that series against the Titans, but we've also seen Shaxx being brought into the mix as well, and you kind of have, the whole fact fiction and Shaxx backstory of, them, stopping the 30-game win streak of Fusion University, before that, and then to go on to slay the Titans, and then their streak. So I feel like between those accomplishments in themselves, I can't imagine, like, what level of confidence that's going to give to that team, but the Valiant have been turning things around, which is good, because after you have an 0-7 stage at any point during a season, obviously, you have a lot of catching up to do with these shortened stages throughout the season, since each one is 7 games, but knowing what their schedule is, what do you think the possibility of the Valiant making the Stage 3 playoffs is? Because there's a decent chance, like, they're not going to have a big differential come the end of Stage 3 at this point, even if they do lose out.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's where they sit right now. As long as they keep these next 2 games close, like if they could take them to a map 5, they have a very good shot at, going to the playoffs. And honestly, if they take 1 win, they're in. So if they can, you kind of look at it and say, well, they just upset Vancouver, so it's possible they could upset either team. Obviously, you're looking more at London than the Spark, just because Spark have been consistent. But we haven't seen the Spark really tested against a really good Sombra team recently. So I'm curious to see how they stack up. I'm also curious to see how Gushue stacks up against Fact Fiction, because Fact Fiction kind of had Bumper's number last week. Like, Bumper still, got the best of him in a lot of, like, the Rhine battles, but he couldn't land a shatter. Like, Fact Fiction was really good at stopping the shatters. So it was really only when he was caught out of position or, hacked or something that Bumper got off the shatter. So I'm curious to see how that matchup plays up. But honestly, if you're the Valiant, you're probably prepping more for London than the Spark at this point, just because they're the team that you can hit them at a low point and maybe upset them a little easier. But I think if you're the Valiant, you just keep doing what you're doing. You keep playing your strengths. The only thing that might throw a wrench in them is Kariv has looked decent on Zenyatta, obviously much better on Ana. So if teams really stick to that, like that Diva based comp, which you would expect the Spark to do, that could throw a little wrench, because you don't really run a lot of Ana against Diva. So I think that might be their struggle there. But I think it's up in the air. Like, I think Valiant is on the upswing. Like, I put them a little higher on our power rankings, and I think they have a really good shot to make the stage playoffs. But they have like a middle of the road, like, strength of schedule for Stage 4. Like, I wouldn't say it's easy, but I definitely wouldn't say like it's the hardest schedule. Like, they're not playing the Shock in Vancouver in the same week, like we've seen Atlanta do. So I think as long as they can keep up the pace and go 500 from here on out, or a little above 500, I think they could squeak into that play-in tournament. So I think Valiant, I think they got that morale boost by beating Vancouver. And as I said in the past, Overwatch is a very confidence-based game. If you have the confidence behind you, you're gonna do some wacky shit, and it might work. And that's basically what you need. And that's what these lower teams are lacking now, is they're lacking the confidence. And if you go on stage and you beat Vancouver, you have confidence now. So I expect Valiant to do big things. I just hope they don't pull a Houston and turn around and lose to like Florida. So
Yeah, see, I was honestly gonna ask you that, like, because you did have the Outlaws who go out and beat the Shock, only to go lose to the Mayhem. So, like, does that just put him back to square one? Like, where does that leave Houston here?
No, I mean confidence is very important, but you gotta temper that a little bit. Like that's what the coaching staff is for, is be like, okay, well we still need to prep, we still need to do we need to do due diligence and practice and do all our prep. But when you're in the match, you have a little more adrenaline, you have a little more going on, and hopefully you just avoid those dumb mistakes. And that's basically what happened to Houston. Is like I said earlier, Houston, I'm not judging them too harshly on Florida because I feel like that was like a prep issue. Like they didn't prep for Florida as much as they probably should have, and then that led to sloppy play, and that led to like miscommunications and being out of position, and it just snowballs like that. And like I said, when you put Linkster in a Widow duel, you would kind of expect Linkster to not get completely bodied. And I think that was Houston's big problem is, I said Jake was caught out of position a lot, but that was because he had to play so tentative because Linkster was losing that duel and Linkster had to play so far back and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going into Houston. I'm not, last week I was definitely like tempered expectations. Like I don't think they're as good as people are making out to be. Oh, it's getting late here. But this week I will stay consistent and just say that they're not as they lost to Florida, sure, that happens, but they beat the Shock, so they can't be that bad. Like I would still put them like 15th, 16th, maybe a little higher. I think those people that were putting them in like 9th and 8th were really jumping the gun. Like they haven't quite proven that, but I don't think they're sliding back to that like traffic light trio where they were basically running Raucous on Hanzo type of thing. So I think the best way I can sum this up is the floor is raising. Like these lower teams are getting better, so they're getting closer to that lower middle of the pack. So we're gonna see that kind of get together. The only one we're really waiting on is the Justice at this point, and they are also getting better. They're just not quite showing us the same amount of movement upward that these other two bottom teams are.
Well, at least Jonas made a pollute this past week, which is something that we haven't really been able to say.
Yeah, well,
I mean, they did a pretty good Primal Rage on Paris.
It took him 1.5 seasons, but boy, did he finally make a play that every other Winston player has made at least a few times by now.
You got to start somewhere. But for the Valiants, something to note is this week they do have matches on Thursday and Friday, so there's really no break in between, and they do have the first match in both of those days. So let's go ahead and jump into our Stage 3 Week 4 preview. So taking a look at the matches that we do have, our game of the week on Sunday to kick things off is the LA Gladiators versus the Vancouver Titans. So of course, Titans are going to look to bounce back after that upset loss that they suffered. So on Thursday, we have the Hanzhou Spark versus the LA Valiant. We have Paris Eternal going up against one of 18 different looks from the Seoul Dynasty. And we also have the San Francisco Shock going up against the Chengdu Hunters. So, looking at this, I like that the Valiant are facing the Spark at this point because it's all about the momentum at this point. You have the Spark who have consistently looked good and they beat in a lot of the top teams in the league. And then you have the Valiant who basically beat the best team in the league who are also coming in really hot. So we'll see if they try to just run traditional 3-3 or if they're going to continue to rely on that Sombra play, which I'm assuming they're probably going to run at the Spark just because that's been one of their least tested looks against them. Paris versus Dynasty is another interesting one because, Eternal has looked good on 3-3, but they have been pretty susceptible to the Sombra play as well. But Dynasty haven't really overly relied on that as of yet. But, we can pretty much expect the Hunters to throw, DPS straight into the Shock. We'll see how that fares. So kind of like looking at Thursday, what do you feel like is going to be the highlight of that day in regards to the matches?
Oh, I mean, honestly, it's going to be the Spark and Valiant. Just because both of these teams, I mean, obviously there's a lot more riding on the Valiant winning than the Spark, because the Spark are just higher up in the standings overall for the season, as well as the stage. But honestly, like that's the big one for me. Dynasty, I think, will just crush Eternal. Shock and Chengdu might be interesting, but I feel like Shock is probably just going to run over them. Like Chengdu, when they've run against these heavier tier teams, have struggled. So honestly, Spark Valiant, just because of what's online. Like I'm curious to see, like I mentioned earlier, how the Spark tank line handles the Valiant's tank line, just because Valiant has looked good the last couple of weeks, and obviously looked really good yesterday. So that's actually my match of the week. Like, so yeah.
So moving on to Friday, we have the Spitfire going up against the Valiant. We have Defiant going up against the Gladiators, and then we have Outlaws versus Justice. So 2/3 of that stoplight trio.
Yeah,
that's gonna be an interesting one, because I feel like Justice, we see moments of brilliance at times from this team, but it always kind of just goes full circle back to the main tank and how Jonas does against the rest of the league, basically, because the main tank stats are not good. But there are times when we do see Corey pop off. We have seen a lot of plays being made from him, whether it is on Zarya or if he's playing a hit scan. But they do look better when they are running DPS compositions, and Corey versus Linkser could go either way, because Corey does have a very high skill ceiling as well. And it does kind of like make you wonder, like, what is Linkser's mindset going to be right now, knowing that he basically just got rocked by Saya player. So like I'm really curious to see how the Outlaws are going to come into this, because there's a good chance that they're going to probably overlook Justice, because their other team that they are facing is also the Defiant, who are also kind of like a team that could be susceptible to getting slept on as well, since they've been also dealing with their fair struggles. So I feel like for the Outlaws, when you just kind of look at this week, this is really one of those trap weeks that could go either way.
This is a big week for the Outlaws. This is basically what's going to cement them as either going up or just staying at the bottom of it. Like, was their wins flukes? Probably not. Like, they worked hard. They deserve those wins. But teams are learning to adapt, and it's basically what we saw at the beginning of stage 3, late into stage 2, where teams started running DPS against Chengdu, and then they were better at DPS than Chengdu. That's basically what a lot of these teams are running into, is they're starting to hit, I don't want to say mirror matchups, but at least DPS to DPS matchups, and certain teams have higher caliber DPS. So this is going to be where Outlaws have to step it up. Like, obviously you would fully expect them to beat Washington, because like you said, Washington has had a few pop-out moments, but when you compare them as a whole, Outlaws should be able to beat them. Like, honestly, other than Corey and Linkser, there's really not a level of matchup there. Like, you could maybe argue that the support lines are pretty similar, but when you see Raucus on the Ana, like, if Raucus gets the Ana, I would definitely consider him a better support than maybe Arc, or at least on par with Sleepy. So I think that's going to be a very big game for the Outlaws, and I think they need to take it handily. Like, if Outlaws seriously want to make a run at trying to get into the play-in tournament, which is going to be very hard for them at this point, they need to start taking a lot of these wins, like 4-0, like they did last week. And then they, like you said, they come into the Defiant, and the Defiant have struggled with their new tank duo. So I think at that game, I think it's going to be up to the tank line to just bully, Gods and Shyark, and keep the lanes open at that point, because I don't think the rest of the Defiant can answer Jake and Linkser. So this is, like you said, a good trap weekend for the Outlaws. But I have confidence that they, as long as they do their due diligence in practice, they should be able to take both of these matches. But they need to start taking like 4-0s if they seriously want to make a run at it.
Yeah, they basically need every map they can get with the current differential that they do have. So moving into Saturday, we have the Dallas Fuel going up against the New York Excelsior. So things probably not going to get any better for Dallas, unfortunately. We do have the Uprising going up against the Fusion, which, I dreaded the last time these two teams played each other just due to the momentum that they both did not have at the time. But, that one was very close the last time, so we'll see what's going to happen in this one. But I'm assuming we're probably going to get more Hackfist from the Uprising, and hopefully Aim God will still be in the starting lineup, and, the substitutions on the support line will be, thing of the past at this point. We do have the Mayhem going up against the Spark, and then we close out with the Dragons going up against the Charge. And honestly, for me, this week, that's probably going to be the one that I'm mostly intrigued by, outside of the Spark versus Valiant, because you have the Dragons who, they just picked up Envy. We have been seeing 3-3 outside of the Somber looks, and the Charge, I feel like the Charge right now are they kind of don't know what they're doing as of yet. Because initially when Nero came in, we saw a lot of the DPS looks, and it kind of went back to 3-3, and now we've kind of been seeing a flip-flop back and forth. I really don't know what Charge look we're going to get this week. And the Dragons right now they're definitely, in the discussion for being, a top 5, top 6 team in the league. Especially when you consider the potency of their Sombra compositions and how well that has done against these other teams. So the Dragons should probably take this handily, but I would expect to see the Charge run in DPS compositions in this particular series to put up a closer series at the end of the day. But outside of that, I'm not expecting too much out of the Mayhem when I go up against the Spark, just with how good the Spark have looked as of late. And if they try to run 3-3 against the Spark, that's definitely going to be a pretty grave mistake. So hopefully they'll try to throw a couple of different oddity looks at the Spark in that series.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these matches aren't super interesting to me. Obviously, I'm looking for Dallas to at least do something. I don't expect them to beat Excelsior, but I hope they at least look a little bit better. We saw a little bit of life out of them last week here and there, so maybe an extra week of practice they can at least make it a tolerable game to watch. But I am curious about the Boston Philly match, because Philly recently has looked like a team that honestly, they haven't looked horrible, but they haven't looked great. They almost look like apathetic. I don't want to quote Monty, because if you watch Monty's power rankings, he describes them as a team that doesn't want to be there. And I don't think that's true. I think they want to be there, obviously.
Just not in this meta.
Right. I feel like they are just done with this current situation. So I think this will be a big week for them, because obviously they're at 2-2. Boston is at 1-5. So Boston's already out of the stage playoffs. So Boston has almost nothing left to lose other than, dropping a little further in the overall rankings. So I think this is Philly's match to lose at this point. So they need to kind of pick themselves up and say, all right, we need to get back in the groove. We need to double down on our trash goats, whatever they want to do, and actually put, some pep in their step, I guess is the best way to say it. But that match intrigues me just because, if we see Boston come out with the same look they had last week, that's going to force Philly to play DPS, and that may be what Philly needs to be the jump start to at least not look so apathetic.
Yeah, I mean, we have started to see Sato on the Orisa. We've seen double sniper compositions from the Fusion as well. So I would expect more of the same here. And I do feel like if you are going to just force Fusion to play DPS, and that's probably going to be a mistake just due to the fact that, well, we saw how good of a 1-2 punch Carpe and EQO were this past season, which, we haven't really gotten to talk about a whole lot just due to the current meta and the fact that both of them have been very lackluster at their current roles in the 3-3 meta. So going into Sunday, again, we do have our game of the week, which is the Gladiators going up against the Titans. We have the Spitfire versus the Shock, Outlaws up against the Defiant, and then we close out with the Hunters going up against the Dynasty. I'm hoping that Dynasty just comes in and crush the Hunters, but, the Hunters are another one of those teams who, when it comes to 3-3, regardless of, when they run it, they are very sneaky on how good they are at 3-3 just because they do rely on their DPS looks a lot. So there are times when they do give the best teams in the league a run for their money, even at 3-3, whether it is expected or unexpected. So I don't know. There's always that seed of doubt in the back of my mind whenever I see one of my teams going up against the Hunters, just because we've seen a lot of good things from them, but there are a lot of times when the Hunters just kind of middle out, and I'm hoping that this is going to be another one of those cases, because the Dynasty really need this win, and a convincing one at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot on the line for a lot of these teams that are playing on Sunday. Vancouver, they're coming off their loss, and they're going to play the Gladiators, but obviously the Gladiators have a lot riding on this because currently they are sitting at the precipice for the stage 3 playoffs, and now they do play the Defiant earlier in the week, so we'll have a little bit better picture by then. But if they do beat the Defiant, they still are only 4-2. I think, right? Did my math right? So yeah, they'll be 4-2 if they beat the Defiant. So a loss against Vancouver, if it's very convincing for Vancouver, could still put them out of the stage playoffs. So they need to at least prep. They need to at least make it close, or even better, win against Vancouver, making them the second LA team to beat Vancouver, and put themselves in the stage playoffs to hopefully win maybe their first stage playoff game. But beyond that, Spitfire versus Shock, we're curious to see, how the Shock will do. They've looked a little iffy here and there, and then they played some lower tier teams, so then they kind of cruised over them. And obviously London is London. We don't know what we'll see out of there. We talked about Houston.
Where's Guard at? He was their initial Sombra player for the Spitfire, and then he's just been nowhere to be found in the Sombra meta.
Right. So it's curious to see what kind of looks we'll get out of the Spitfire. Now, granted, the Spitfire are also very close to making the stage playoffs. So if they have a very good weekend, they can make it in. This is obviously one of the more interesting week 4s, and obviously then we have the Atlanta homestand, which not every team will play. So we will have a very good indication of who's going where by the end of this week. And then there's the Seoul game. Seoul could be caught off guard. We don't know what's going on with Fission, but you would have to think that Seoul, if they stick to their guns, should be able to outplay Chengdu, because Seoul's DPS has looked very, very good. And Chengdu, while they have found varying degrees of success against 3-3 teams, when they run up against strong DPS teams, they seem to falter. It's really weird. Chengdu is known as the DPS team, even in the 3-3 meta. But when they're faced with DPS, they're not that great of a DPS team. Jinmu has his moments, and Ameng is still obviously very good at Wrecking Ball. But, if Jinmu versus Fleta in a Pharah battle, as good as Jinmu is, I'd still probably say Fleta has the advantage there. So it's curious to see how that one's going to play out. But I have to feel like Seoul have a good chance of taking that one. And if Seoul do take that, they're a 3-2 team too. So, at that point, we're going to know kind of where Seoul sits. It is honestly all these 3-2 teams have to show up big, and because some of them play each other, that's not going to happen. So this is actually a really exciting week for the stage playoff picture. It kind of lessens my excitement for the Atlanta homestand a little bit. But I will say that going into the Atlanta homestand, I'm glad that these lower tier teams are performing a little better, because that was like my resident sleeper moment for the Atlanta homestand. Is I'm like, oh cool, the Justice, the Mayhem, like the Fusion, cool. Let's watch these teams that really aren't doing great play all weekend. So I am glad to see these teams stepping up. But like this week, week 4, will give us a very good playoff picture. So, you know, teams to watch, obviously the ones you really want to keep your eye on right now are all these 3-2 teams.
Basically, like 11 of the teams are at 3 wins right now this stage.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, Shanghai's a little bit better because they're 3-1, but they play a lot these next 2 weeks. So really, you want to see Seoul, Gladiators. You need a resurgent from the Outlaws, and then a Spitfire, and then there's still the sleeper of Paris. So Paris, even though they only play against Seoul this week, and then I believe they're off the next week. Yes, so Paris is at 3-3. So if Paris can upset Seoul, they have a chance to make it in as well. So this is going to be a fun week. And if it's anything like yesterday, it's going to be a very exciting week, and nobody's going to get any points in pick'ems.
I mean, they'll get some points, just maybe not for one day. Well, they'll get 1 point. Because a few will lose, because that's just what they do whenever the Outlaws are doing well.
I think that's where most of your points come from that you're beating me on, because I refuse to not pick the Fuel. Like I am that much of a Fuel fan that even when they play Vancouver, I still pick the Fuel because I am not a bitch. I will stand by my.
I will tell you this past week, there were 3 matches that I flip-flopped on, and I ended up dropping all of them.
Ouch.
I was not happy. One of those was Spark Dynasty. So that was a feels bad, man. But yeah, it was just one of those weeks. But it seems like a lot of people are kind of like in the same boat this past week. So like I didn't feel as bad about it, but it was just like should have just thought with my head instead of listening to my heart. Oh well. It is what it is, but you know what? Dynasty will come back. They'll just 4-0 the Hunters, and we'll be back in business. So that's all that matters. So with that being said, guys, I think it's time that we go ahead and wrap things up for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best things to do is to leave us a review over on iTunes or your podcasting app of choice. We are always looking for ways to improve the show to make for a better listening experience for you. If you would like to find additional Overwatch-related content, consider checking out Overwatch Recall, where you can find Overwatch, Overwatch League, Path to Pro, Fantasy, Overwatch League stuff on our website at owlnshow.com/OWRecall. And then episodic listens are released pretty much every Sunday, except yesterday. I still got to release this week's. But to keep up to date with all the latest in the podcasting for Overwatch, follow us on Twitter at OWRecall. And of course, if you're listening live, I'll probably be working on a Recall immediately after this recording is done. If you guys want to support the show further, you can do a couple of things. You could throw your Twitch Prime subs on us, which costs you absolutely nothing. So you can get our cool network emoticon, or you could also consider pledging to our Patreon, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month. So for more information, go to patreon.com/OWLnetwork. And if you were on our Patreon earlier in the week, you probably saw a sneak peek at what is to come in regards to merchandise. So you too can join the likes of our Master and Above patrons, Blazing Bob, Brendan, Joseph Ball, and Owl in helping our network grow. So I want to thank everyone again for the continued support, and we greatly appreciate that. So with that being said, Spider, of course, we have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us. So why don't you close out the show?
Sure thing. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at contact@OWLNshow. If you want to find us on Twitter, it's at OWLNshow. Check out our website. It's www.owlnshow.com. You can find our youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We put all our VODs up there as well as various other content. Now that my crazy week is over, I will start working on some new content for you there. I want to get back into that and hopefully have something special for you.
Preferably not my VOD reviews.
Oh, you just gave it away, so I wasn't even going to say it. So,
Yeah, I know you were gonna go there.
So thanks to the replay feature, every time I play with Totem and Edinar, I will find a map and do VOD reviews. So
Our super serious arcade games, yeah.
Yeah, that's the only downside. Like right now, all I have is mystery heroes, so all I can literally critique you on is mechanics, which I don't want to do. Like that's not gonna help you. Like aim better, okay? Yeah, like,
just click heads, forehead.
Right, exactly. So we will have to do some actual quick play games to give me some stuff. And obviously, I want to start doing the actual pro like match reviews, and I am working on something for this Thursday. I don't know if it'll be ready because I have a lot of work crunch going on, but that's something that's coming up. But anyway, back to the shilling. If you want to talk to us, I've mentioned it multiple times during the show. You can talk to us on our Discord. It's discord.me/OWLN show. We have a lot of conversation going on during the games, off time. Definitely check that out. You could find us on Twitch, twitch.tv/OWLN show. We are a Twitch affiliate. Like Totem said, you can give us Twitch Prime or subscribe to us. You get a cool emoticon, and it helps support the network. If you're listening to the audio, I would highly check out our live shows because we get a little crazy in here sometimes. But we also have multiple shows during the week. Our Monday night show is Overwatch League Network, which you're currently listening to. It is Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific. Tuesdays is Fantasy Night, not Dungeons and Dragons, but it is Overwatch League by the numbers, where we go through all the fantasy numbers and they give you their tips and stuff like that.
To be fair, there are dragons.
There are dragons. All right, so no dungeons, unless you're the Washington Justice. And that is Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Wednesdays is our variety Overwatch show. That is Totem and the Grand Poobah of fantasy. I don't even know what his title is now. Edinar, and that is Heroes Never Die, and that is Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. And then we do host streams throughout the week, so if you can't subscribe, I understand. Money's tight during the summer. We got a lot going on. But hit the follow button so you at least get notified when we go live with the various streams. And one more time, patreon.com/OWL network. Just last way to support the show. You can find me on Twitter. I typically post multiple times during the day, just random stuff. It's not all Overwatch. But I try to keep it as non-political as possible. So it's just a lot of fun. You can find me at SpiderGD. And Totem, where can they find you?
Well, I'm also on Twitter at TotallyDrunkCTR, and we'll see what sort of wizardry is going to be happening in the Overwatch League this week after the shenanigans that went down in a prior week. But we're expecting a lot of interesting things to happen just due to the amount of congestion in regards to the playoff picture for this current stage. With that being said, guys, I want to thank you again for hanging out with us tonight on Overwatch League Network. You've been listening to episode number 85. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined as always by my co-host Spider, and we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night for OWL by the numbers, and if not then, we'll see you next time, guys. Take care, and have a good night.